Firefox, but I guess the sound is pretty good here. Cool, okay. I'll just be talking like this then. Okay. So yeah, this is a presentation about the Janitor. I'll start by rambling a bit about the project, explaining a bit how it works, etc. But I want this to be an interactive session, so if at some point you feel you want to ask a question, please feel free to interrupt, or there will be time for questions afterwards. And I'll start by talking about some of the problems I see with the way we develop software that to sort of build the case for something like the Janitor. So first I'd like to talk to you about pianos. The way we do software development today, the way we onboard people so that they get started is basically, I like to use the image of a piano. It's somebody coming to you saying, hey, I would like to learn how to play the piano. And you say, sure, here's a book with do-it-yourself instructions on how to build a piano. And that seems absurd, because why couldn't they just use a piano and get started playing? And so, okay, people take the book, it's awesomely well written, super clear, but so they need to find all the components to build a piano, and they assemble it themselves, but they're no experts in building pianos, of course. They're going to make mistakes, they're not going to understand some things properly, and so maybe they're going to miss some parts of the instructions. But if they manage to build a piano, at some point they might have some funky piano that almost breaks down, but not quite, and then they can get started doing their software development, the first thing they wanted to do. That's an insane thing to me. Why would you tell everybody to build their own development environment on their machines, which is a super complex thing? Isn't there a way to make this simpler? So the first problem I identify is that developers are not experts at setting up or maintaining or optimizing a build environment. They might have a build environment that basically works, but it's not going to be the fastest build environment, so there's going to be errors. It's going to take them a lot of time to do this, and if they change machines, they're going to need to do this on several different machines. But should developers really be experts at building development environments? I would like this to be two separate jobs, sort of. You can be focused on software engineering, or you can be focusing on having a setup that builds really fast and is super efficient and is powerful, etc. There's another problem I see with asking people to create their own environments. And so it's time for another metaphor. Oh, there it is. So say a project has 1,000 developers, and all these 1,000 developers create their own environment locally on their machine, and they're keeping their tree up to date. They're pulling in source updates every day or every week, and then they're recompiling. And we are doing this in a massively parallel way that is not really efficient. If there is 1,000 developers, these 1,000 developers will build the new sources locally, and they will not share resources. It's basically the same thing as having, so each has their own car, and we're all driving in the same direction, but having so many cars is not really efficient, and some people might have slower cars. So in this case, something more efficient would be to take, say, a high-speed train or a flight, so to kind of put all of our resources together to create something, a development environment that is really a lot faster. And so how would you do such a thing? 1,000 developers, 1,000 laptops. What if you had a sort of central server where experts at building development environments build the best possible development environment? So for the piano metaphor, that's like an amazing piano that's highly efficient and super beautiful and works and is robust. And what if you could share access to this piano to everybody who wants to learn how to play the piano, and they can have instant access, they don't have to figure out how to build stuff themselves, they can get started a lot quicker, and they're going to have a better time as a developer because it's going to be more efficient. There's also some idea of energy consumption. If we all rebuild the same things 1,000 times in parallel, that's not really efficient, and we can save resources if we can centralize that somewhat. Here, maybe I'd like to talk about the component build, artifact build, sorry, which is an improvement on that step. And so instead of having to build your own piano from parts that you find everywhere, you still have to have some basic tools set up on your computer, but you can download parts that are easier to assemble, and so it makes it a little bit better, but it's not quite as good as having instantly access to a piano to start working on. So that's the second problem. Our collective build infrastructure is really distributed in a way that doesn't make sense. If we have $1,000 for laptops, we're not doing it the right way. So I was talking about a central server. To create a central environment that is highly efficient, one tool that I really like about this is Docker. Maybe you've stopped listening at this point because there's a lot of hype around Docker and many people use it the wrong way, I feel. But the two main interesting features of Docker, I think, are copy on write and Docker files. If you're not familiar with copy on write, who here knows how copy on write works? Okay, so great, I'll explain a little bit more. Say you have a repository of Firefox source code that is 10 gigabytes. With copy on write, you can make instant copies really fast, and they don't take that much space on disk. You can make 1,000 copies, it's going to be fast, and it's not going to blow your disk over. The footprint on the disk will remain 10 gigabytes. Because the shallow copies that are created reference the same bytes of the original repository. And what if you make a change to that copy? Will that affect the original copy? And that's where copy on write kicks in. Actually, in that shallow copy of the repository, if you modify one file, the system is going to say, okay, this file no longer references the original file in the repository, it creates another file. So the shallow copy now has the footprint on disk of just a single file. This works really well for checkouts of Firefox because users will very rarely modify every byte of the 10 gigabytes of the Firefox repository, and so we can put a lot of things in common. So we can fit a Firefox checkout on a single machine and have 1,000 developers duplicate them in many ways. It's going to be really fast. Docker files is the second great thing. It's a set of instructions that you run on top of a Linux environment or any base image that reliably creates an environment. So it's a recipe to create an environment, and it's reproducible. So we can write a Docker file for the Firefox environment, and that's a list of instructions. And when you run that, you have a Firefox-based image that then everybody can duplicate in many ways. Okay, so I'll show how this works in a minute with a few demos. But if you have a central environment on the server, how do you access it? That's, I guess, the tricky part that people don't always think is a good idea, to access a central environment on the server. Because you connect over SSH or you have some sort of remote interface. And I've been trying solutions to access remote environments, different solutions over 5 years. That's supposed to be the Cloud9 logo. It's moving. Anyway, just imagine a Cloud9 logo. So Cloud9 is a website that is an IDE, and it's really amazing. I will do some demos of Cloud9, which is much better than image. So it's a website. It's called c9.io. The source code for the HTML specification, because it's an insanely large file, and it's really fast to open and edit in Cloud9 IDE. It's even faster than local editors. So this source file, if you open this on your local computer using Atom, for example, your computer starts screaming and it gets really hot, and it's really slow to use. And I have trouble believing how fast Cloud9 is at displaying this file. It's actually 200,000 lines. Almost, and so it does syntax highlighting, and many editors just bail out of syntax highlighting at this point. And you can do search, which is pretty cool. Like for example, if I search for my console adna, it's pretty fast. It works. I wonder if there's a table element in this file. There's one, and so you saw it's pretty fast, right? And actually, I didn't demo the opening of the file, which is also somewhat fast. So the editor, so the general idea people have of web-based IDE, web-based editor is that they're insanely slow, and I agree that usually they are, but this specific editor is really fast, and I don't quite understand why it's that fast. I've been doing editor performance so I was a Codemeer contributor for a while, and we implemented the viewport. So you just only display a specific part of the file. If it's really large, you don't need to display the rest, and that makes it fast. But Codemeer is still not as fast as ACE, which is what the Cloud9 team is using. But maybe the coolest part is the terminal, which is a real terminal. You can use ls, you can apt-get install stuff. You can do anything you would do locally on your machine. And actually, when I demoed this to Paul Rouget, who works on Servo, he just clicked on the maximize button, and then he had the terminal. And he was, oh, this is pretty neat. Like I can do whatever I want with this. I can use Vim, and he was editing, and he just forgot completely about the IDE and the editor and the search function, etc. There are a few nice tricks, like for example, finding files quickly. So in this repository, there aren't many files, but maybe I can show Firefox, which has more files. So this is my Firefox checkout, which I use to work. Here it is. So you can use mark build, etc. And if you want to find a file, say you know that the DevTools has a file that is called dark theme something, you can just type dark theme. And usually it works. Loading the first line. Oh. Okay. I guess it doesn't always work. Okay. Oh well, okay. We'll forget about it. And there is also a very cool collaborative thing, and that's something you cannot do locally really easily. The Kinto team, I showed this to, and they do a lot of pair programming, and they said this is awesome. You can invite people into your repository, and then you're basically editing, like in Google Docs, you see the cursors of everybody and what they're doing in the sources. And they actually had a contributor who was having trouble with Kinto, and they were exchanging instructions on IRC, and it didn't quite work. They didn't quite figure out what was the problem. And they were actually able to invite him into a repository, and he wrote the code in the actual project, and then they immediately saw what the problem was, and they said they saved half a day of work thanks to this collaborative feature. I think it's pretty neat. There's also a debugger interface, which is pretty cool. It's for JavaScript, but Harvard University contributed a debugger frontend that works with GDB. And so you can connect to a debugger that is connected to the Firefox binary, and you can just step through instructions graphically, which I think is really awesome. And another great point of this is that it's a website, so it's accessible from anywhere. So for example, if you have a test that fails on Firefox on some builds, instead of trying to reproduce it locally and have some debugger things there, you can just connect Cloud9 to that build machine that failed and actually debug the binary that actually failed. And I think that's a really powerful idea. So that's a lot of good things about Cloud9. I really love it. I've been using it for 4 years, 4 months, sorry. A couple of years more on other projects. And that's basically it for Cloud9. The only limitation, I think, for working on Firefox is once I've built Firefox in this thing, I would like to run it, and that doesn't work here. Because it says, oh, there's no graphical environment. Oh, and click the window. By the way, if you see a leak in the code above, please talk to me. I'm trying to fix. I'm supposed to fix two leak windows. Anyway, so to run it graphically, I had to use a different tool, which is called NoVNC. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it basically is a web page that has a canvas element that re-implements in JavaScript a VNC client that connects over WebSocket to a VNC client. That sounds completely crazy, I agree, but it's actually pretty useful. So I have implemented here, and here it is. So here I have some test results, and I can actually run the Firefox graphically. So the editor is external. It's a bit less nice than Cloud9, but at some point I would like to integrate this graphical interface into Cloud9 so you can use both the Gray terminal and the graphical environment. It's a debug build, so it's a bit slow to start. But yeah, so that runs the Firefox graphically in a canvas inside the Firefox. And that's actually the one I built, so it has my new features about debugging, which I'm working on. So yeah. One of the proudest things that I experienced with this is, so at some point I was asking Etienne from the Paris, who used to work in the Paris office, and he's really passionate about like frames per second and efficiency and things that are beautiful and nice. And at some point I was having a CSS problem, and I asked him to come over, and he saw this NoVNC interface, which I was showing the problem in. And he said, "Oh, it looks usable." and yeah, so if Etienne says that, it means a lot to me. Okay, so that's the three components: Docker to have a central environment, Cloud9 to connect to it, and NoVNC to run things graphically. Now to show you how it all works together. So I have a video, but the sound isn't great. The video is on the website, so you can have a look. But I'll show you what the design looks like. Huh. Okay. Well, here is in smaller. There are two domains. Cloud9 is a separate domain, and Janitor is the domain that is hosted on a server that is co-hosted with several French administrative services because they're supporting open source, and Sylvestre has a few servers there, so he very generously contributed the server. There's a web app on there that controls the Docker node, and Docker creates many different containers in less than 2 seconds. And every container has an SSH server and a NoVNC server. Cloud9 is the IDE, but they support different backends, and so this is basically another backend for Cloud9. And when a user comes in and asks the Janitor for a new environment, it's going to spawn a container, and at the same time it's going to load the Cloud9 IDE, which will connect via SSH to the container. Both things happen simultaneously. I can show you, it's pretty quick. So say I would like to contribute to Thunderbird, and I've never done this before, and I'm on Windows actually, and I only have Nightly installed, no local tools or anything. And I just go to this website, and I click Thunderbird, and two things happen simultaneously. The first thing is it spawns a container in the backend with Thunderbird, all the sources, the recent sources there, pre-compiled. And it launches Cloud9 IDE, which connects over SSH to that container. And so here we are in the container. It has all the files of Thunderbird, and you can compile Thunderbird. Build. And it's pretty neat. Like you can look for files. Maybe there's a CSS file here. That is interesting. This is something from a couple hours to a few days, a few weeks. And you replace that with a click on a button that opens in less than 2 seconds, and an ID. I think that's a really powerful idea. So while it builds, I'll continue with my presentation. I have a few words on what the strong parts of Janitor are and what the weak parts are. Strong part is you can access a quick checkout from anywhere. It's the web. If you have a web browser, you're covered. You can access it from a tablet and even from a phone. One day there was a patch that I really wanted to land, and I was waiting at a restaurant in a queue, and I had my phone, and somebody said, "Oh, R+, but please rename this variable." And I was, I want to land this. And so I used my phone, the terminal, I edited the variable name, and I re-uploaded the patch, and I was able to land it. I've even used it to remotely support a hackathon. So the participation team ran a Firefox hackathon in Zurich 2 months ago, where contributors were able to use the Janitor to land a few patches. And actually there were a few server crashes for some bugs that are now fixed. And I was at a wedding, no computer, and I had just had my phone, and I was like, ugh. And I was able to restart the server and fix a bug on the phone. I think this is nuts, but it's sometimes useful. So, as I said, it's great for hackathons because you don't need time to get started, obviously. You can get a lot of contributors started pretty quickly. It also has an unforeseen advantage on branching, which I think is pretty amazing. When you can create an environment in less than 2 seconds, you can create as many environments as you need. For example, if you're working on several features, on several bugs, or doing reviews at the same time, you can open them all simultaneously in different tabs, and you have them all open at the same time. And switching between tabs is a lot faster than switching between branches. If you switch branch, you have to recompile, and having different tabs, I think it's more powerful. It's less great for if you have no internet. Obviously, the main question about Cloud9 and things like that is how do you work on a train or on a plane? That doesn't work. It actually somewhat works. What I did was, when I took a train ride, I had my phone with a 3G connection, and the hardest thing was to, so actually I was tethering, I was not developing on my phone. I was tethering to my computer, but the first hardest thing that I did was loading the Cloud9 IDE, so first page load, but then the editor works offline. If the connection gets lost and comes back, it synchronizes pretty quick. And so I was able to, in a 4-hour train ride, just code away and not bothering about when it synchronizes or not. The only thing that doesn't work offline is the terminal, because obviously TMUX, you cannot send instructions because you need feedback. It's not great for working on hardware or operating system specific work, obviously because Docker makes you run processes that are isolated in Linux kernel, and everything is emulated. So obviously in no VNC, you're not running on GPU. So for some works on Servo, if you need to do driver work or performance work, it might not work quite as you expect. And also for security sensitive work, it's not a good idea to use the Janitor because since you're sharing a kernel that might be exploitable, anybody on the server can run a rootkit on that kernel, and then pretty bad things can happen. Docker is pretty good at security, but not perfect, obviously, and some people can get out of the Docker container and into the host machine. And so yeah, so security work is not a good idea. So where are we now? The Janitor prototype is in alpha. The website is here. You can use it today to click on a button, access an environment, get started on hacking. I've been using it for 4 months. My intern, Benoit, so his machine didn't arrive in time. When he was at Mozilla, his laptop wasn't there, and he was like, "Oh, how do I get started?" And I offered him to use the Janitor, and so he got started on it temporarily until he got his machine. And when he received his machine, he felt that it didn't make sense anymore to get all the setup done on his new machine because he was already using Janitor and it works everywhere. And so he continued using it. So we're 2 full-time users of it. There's another person that uses it full-time, and that's a Google employee, François, which we met with Sylvestre. He works on Chrome OS, and he is developing Google Chrome on his Chrome OS Chromebook. And he's using it to run patches as well. I have maybe I can present again. I have a few pieces of data. 107 registered users today, of which 43 are Mozillians, and 2 are Google employees. I'm adding about 5 new users per week. I think the idea is pretty interesting, and especially for community members, that's pretty awesome. And have any contributions been added using the Janitor? well, since I've been using it and somebody else has been using it, there were 15 patches merged into Firefox using the Janitor. 12 merged into Chrome, so it has an impact outside of Mozilla. And there are 40 contributions more in progress. And people are starting to try and contribute to various different projects. Actually, at that point, I didn't show very precisely which projects were supported, which I'll do now. Firefox, Chrome, Thunderbird, Servo, KDE. KDE was added by a friend of mine because he thought he would like to fix some things in his desktop environment, but he was too lazy to download it all on his machine and get setup done. He did the work, though, to write the Docker file for the environment to work on the Janitor. But now you can contribute to KDE in a single click. Thunderbird was added by Philip Kirish, a Thunderbird contributor, core contributor actually, and Mozilla employee. And he said, oh, it's pretty neat like that you support Firefox and Chrome. Maybe I can add support for Thunderbird. And I explained quickly how a Docker file works, and he copied the Firefox Docker file, and in less than a day, we had Thunderbird in production on the deployment. Servo, we did in less than 2 hours. I told Paul Roger about this, and he was like, oh, we need to do this for Servo. And we sat down together, wrote a small Docker file, and then there was Servo editable. And I can actually click on it, access the environment, and build Servo. And actually, it's already built, so I don't need to do this. And run it graphically. Running it graphically was the hardest part, actually, because Servo requires some GPU extensions that weren't available, but you can use it. You can run it using WebRender, and so it's a debug build, so it's really slow, but release builds are much faster. And so you can contribute to Servo without downloading anything to your computer. Yeah, it takes a long time. Yeah. And then it does some layout to make it smaller. Anyway. These are some really cool things that people have been saying about the prototype after trying it out. Maybe it's too small. Yeah, there's one in French. We saw it already. Yeah, especially like this one. So this quote comes from a blog post that Michael did following the Firefox hackathon, and it's a pretty cool blog post that explains what they tried. There were some limitations, some bugs that we fixed, and it was a good stress test for the system. But it worked pretty well, actually. 10 patches merged to Firefox. And so now a few words on what's next. Upcoming milestone is the beta version. I still want to finish a couple things first. There's a NoVNC bug that makes it not work on touchscreens, which is pretty bad. But you can disable touchscreen and it works. And more importantly, I want to add buttons to the IDE, Cloud9 IDE, so that you can automate most of the workflow. That's actually the coolest thing. There's a lot of cool things. It's a really cool thing about Cloud9 IDE is that it's extensible. You can add buttons to, I don't know, like upload to Bugzilla, to push to Moz review, send to try, merge, etc., run tests. And you can aggressively automate all of the workflow into a single IDE interface, which is easy to use. That's one of the things I want to do. Also want to make the web app a bit nicer. And in the future, I will integrate with many more services. Right now, you can contribute. You can push to Bugzilla and you can push to GitHub, but you have to set it up manually in your terminal by copying SSH keys around and your Bugzilla API key. This can be made a lot nicer. I discovered that actually you can sign in with Bugzilla. There is an OAuth path where you can get the API key, so it's just like a click of a button and sign in. And then you're connected to Bugzilla. And that would allow to upload patches very easily in a click of a button. Push to pause review, so you can directly get feedback on your patches and land them pretty quickly. Push to try, etc. For contributors, these things would be really awesome. For example, if there was a connection with Bugs Ahoy from, I forgot his name.
Josh Matthews.
Yeah, Josh Matthews, thank you. Bugs Ahoy is really awesome because it lists all the bugs that are the easiest to fix, and for community contributors, that's really cool because they don't really know how to get started otherwise. And if there was a button like fork Firefox and get started on that particular bug, that would be awesome. Maybe like there's a web welcome screen in the IDE that tells them how to get started, etc. That's sort of Bugs Ahoy for DevTools, which is also pretty neat. And great things to put in the IDE is code intelligence. I would love to get converti scan feedback displayed in the editor, like on the lines you're editing, for example, hey, warning, this is not the right thing to do, or it's a lot more powerful to put that feedback in front of the developer as he's developing in the editor, rather than having him check or check the feedback later. C-Line Analyzer and Scanbuild are also pretty awesome at finding warnings and suggesting improvements. So that's the direction I would like to go. And maybe we can make a partnership with Cloud9 to supercharge this and have a really awesome one-click accessible IDE for, say, Firefox that everybody could use, employees and contributors alike. So to be really efficient and have everything accessible in a single click. Same for Servo. These are all pretty easy to do. Thunderbird and Chrome, etc. And so as I mentioned, adding more projects is pretty easy. So one of the projects I'm looking forward to the most is Rust, because it's really awesome. And I think it would make even more sense than some things that run graphically, because as you saw, NovenC is okay, but it's not the best experience. For Rust, it would be completely awesome, because you can use just Cloud9 and contribute to Rust. If we're doing a bit further, maybe we can support Git or editors like Vim or etc. Another cool thing I forgot to mention is it's great for one-off contributions. So say you have, I sort of mentioned it for KDE, say you have a bug that really annoys you about some piece of software that you would like to fix, but it's just the single contribution you would make to that project, and then you let it go. And it's not worth it to go through all the bootstrapping process. For example, if you want to fix a bug in Git, something that annoys you, you don't want to get started downloading all the tools and setting up and etc. And you just click a button, you fix the bug, that's it. And the ultimate end goal would be to support things like Debian and Linux. But that's a lot harder. I think it would be possible. I would like to.
You forgot one project. Would be great that the Janitor inside the Janitor.
The Janitor inside the Janitor. Actually, it is. You don't even need the Janitor to work on the Janitor. You can use Cloud9 directly. I use Cloud9 to develop the Janitor. But yeah, thank you. And I wanted to quickly thank a lot of people. I know the project's name sounds like my name, but there are so many people involved in this. And I've had a lot of help and support and ideas and code contributions and so on. So thank you very much.
Can I download built-in Pro from the environment to test on a local machine?
Yes, you can download something you built on the environment on your local machine to test. And that's something you would like to do. For example, I would like to support maybe V2G OS as well, and that includes downloading some compiled things, binaries, and you can download them. It's maybe not the nicest experience right now, but it can be made easier if that's an important feature.
Is the environment Mint or Ubuntu or something?
The environment, most of the environments are based on Ubuntu 16.04. And they use the kernel of the Debian server provided by CVest, except the KDE image uses Debian testing, because there were some dependencies that were too old in Ubuntu for KDE.
So Mac OS Big is not available
Oh yes, I guess you would need to cross-compile to OS X. Yeah. One really cool thing that I would like to do is support Windows on this. So by using Windows, you lose a lot of the benefits of the Docker environment that has copy on write, etc., because you would need to use a VM. But I have a prototype that works where you have Windows running in QEMU, and that connects to the NoVNC session, and so you have a Windows 7 accessible. But so if 1,000 developers come and request a Windows machine, that's not going to scale properly. Do you have any other questions?
What are the current limitations on scale?
Current limitations on scale? I'm getting close to filling up the hard disk again, which is a pretty stupid scaling problem to have. But that was one of the first problems I had, and it turned out I had a bad design in my container setup. I would run the set of instructions to build a Firefox build environment, and then I would run update instructions on it every day. So like pull the new sources and build, pull the new sources and build. That would add update layers to eternity. And so some containers that were derived from old images would capture a lot of space because I would have moved to another image. What I'm doing now is I have the base image, and then the update layers, I just run them straight from the base image every day. So an update layer, which I throw away the next day, another update layer, etc., etc. That allows old containers to capture a lot less space. But base images are pretty big. I can show you the sizes, but it's around 10 gigabytes for Firefox. And even more for Thunderbird and Chrome. I have them somewhere here. So yeah, that's basically developing Janitor on Janitor, but it's actually just Cloud9. So say KDE takes 20 gigabytes. Thunderbird currently takes 16 gigabytes too. Chromium takes 34 gigabytes. Servo only takes less than 10 gigabytes. But that's the base images. And in theory, containers should not take considerable space on top of it. The problem is that they capture some update layers sometimes, so update layers can be 3 gigabytes or something. And if there's 1,000 containers, that scales pretty well. I guess that's some overview of the scaling issues right now. Do you have any other questions?
Should we use the environment only for short-lived live projects? For example, speech we should not use the environment for long-lived projects.
So it's better now for short-lived projects, but you can also use it for long-lived projects. The current problem I have is that once you've taken a container from a base image, say that was from a certain day, it doesn't benefit from future updates anymore. And so if you have a project that takes 6 months, your base image will be old, and you have to pull the new sources and rebuild yourself, which is something I would like people not to do, because for one, it takes users time to pull new sources and rebuild, and for another, it doesn't scale, because if 1,000 developers fork an old image and then update each separately, the copy on write doesn't work, and the bytes are not shared anymore. The dream to achieve would be to rebase containers, so to sort of auto-update environments, and that's really something I would love to do. But there are some open questions about it.
Is there any reason why you don't support Android yet? Firefox for Android?
Firefox for Android? It's about the same problem as macOS build or BDG, or it's because the end result, you want it to live on something else. So for example, for Firefox for Android, you would need to build an image that you would then need to flash on your phone. I guess you could support it and have a button that says download Flasher, and then you have Flasher. Sorry?
You could use the emulator.
True. You can also use an emulator. I don't know how fast it would work through NoVNC, but I would love to try. So yeah, consider Firefox for Android project in the pipeline.
You talked about developing when you're offline. Does
Yep.
it say local state when you're offline? And similarly, do you have to worry about browser crashes and losing work that you've done, or how does that part work?
It somewhat saves local state, but not if your browser crashes. I think. I'm not really sure about it. But so it resynchronizes when you have internet. But I think if you crash, you might lose the last lines you type or something. Which is annoying, I agree.
Just curious.
Yeah. Or if you close the tab, actually I think you also lose the work in progress you were making. Would be a good suggestion though to make it so that you don't lose anything if you close the tab.
Does mock test work right now in this environment?
Yes. So I don't know about the full suite. I know that Moki tests work when you run them graphically. I know that some JS tests work when you run them directly from Cloud9 or anywhere. Runting tests, etc. I don't know if there are like some specific hardware tests that would not run.
There are, but
Yeah.
but in general they work.
Okay, yeah, generally it works.
Yeah.
For my work in DevTools, I only use Moki tests and
Right.
ESLint, so that works well.
Cool.
Yes?
So we're in the middle of migrating a lot of the automated builds and tests over to Docker-based
Okay.
images. Do you think there's would be value in like, having exactly the same images used for Janitor as is used in automation?
I noticed the Docker files in the source tree, and I remember noticing some differences about it, but I think the main issue would be that my environments are targeted to developer environments, so there's a lot of nice extra tools that you would not need to run a production build.
Yeah, I was thinking like you could take perhaps the base image used by automation.
Yes.
Because then you have all the same compilers and you don't have to worry about that.
Yes.
And then add on top of that the development tools that
Yeah. And actually that's something I would like to try, to give access on any test machines just by adding a few rules on top of them with developer tools. And so Cloud9 to connect into it, it just basically needs an SSH connection with Tmux and also Node.js for some reason, but it's pretty easy to install them all. Yeah. And actually I think you already had a demo of a basic terminal connected to it and a NoVNC, so yeah. But one step further, Cloud9 would be really awesome, I think, especially for the debugger interface.
I'm not familiar to Cloud9.
Mm-hmm.
The IDE environment is provided by Cloud9 itself or just
Yes.
specific?
No, the
Cloud9.
yeah, the IDE is provided by Cloud9. That's sort of what I was trying to show in the slide. It's on their own domain, and it's a service. Their IDE used to be completely open source, and then they moved away because they're a startup and they wanted to capture some value. So they're pretty much open source in the sense that you can write plugins. So it's not open source at all, but you can write plugins. I meant like you can make any change you would like to Cloud9 because the whole interface has a nice way to write plugins in JSON to add buttons that do whatever you want. But the IDE is served from their own server, so their own domain. Yeah.